Okay, so for everybody that's in, there's a Q&A box. If you could put your any kind of questions and answers, please put them in that lower box, and we'll filter those through for Gerry. Be able to handle those pretty easy. We'll do a Q&A as we go along. Quick thanks to the sponsors making this work, which is Sticks and Picks Podcast, Par Team, Bear Paw Lacrosse Events, Apex Lacrosse Events, Manitoba Lacrosse, Uncommon Fit, and Major Series Lacrosse. So with us now, we have Gerry Van Beek, who's the president of BC Lacrosse. Gerry, welcome to the Global Lacrosse Summit.
Thanks, Brad.
Appreciate you taking time. I know it's a busy week with CLA meetings. I know you've had calls on and off throughout the day here. So talking beforehand, we were talking about keeping this interactive and asking questions. There's obviously, we want as much interactivity, some questions, some comments. Gerry, give us a bit of your background, and then tell us a little bit about BC Lacrosse and what your role in that is right now.
Okay, so my background, I'm presently the president. I've held a variety of roles within the BC Lacrosse Association over the years, and I'll just go through quickly the history. I started playing as a teenager. Friends convinced me to try playing. Played through junior A, retired or stopped playing because of family. Son started playing. I got pulled back in, fell back in love with it. Never lost love with it. And worked through as far as the minor system, show up at an AGM and it's like, hey, you want to be the head coach? Not knowing that it was at that time primarily a administrative job, and that's fine. Coaching is my first love now that I don't play other than old timers. I still play box and field lacrosse old timers because it's a good sweat and a good way to have some fun with some lacrosse people.
You guys have a pretty committed group that does that too.
Yeah, our group is fairly. I play with what's called the Antiques and Tri-City Masters, and we go by a number of different names, and it's a very involved group. And I don't know the exact count, but we probably have some in the neighborhood of 10 or 12 Hall of Famers in our club, including the likes of Russ Hurd and Andy Ogilvie and Jeff Gumbar, but we get together weekly, except right now. So then I got involved with the minor association and through progressions, worked through the different leagues, and I was coaching junior A for about 6 years, and then I moved on to the Langley Thunder. Started as a coach. I figured that the club could find another really good coach, and we did. Several of them, but we needed some help with the general manager part. So I started doing that. And in the meantime, I worked with the CLA through the coaching committee and with the box sector for a few years. And last year, Sowen Gill, longtime friend and a longtime president of BCLA, was leaving. And so I decided to step in and help out. Little did I know that this would be the year that it is with what's happened with COVID, and it's really been it's taxed all of our systems, the non-lacrosse systems of our sport, and that's part of the reason why I'm hoping to share some of the things that we are doing that are helping us to weather the storm, and what's going on in lacrosse and what we think are some of the processes and some of the things you can do to keep your lacrosse activities and keep the administration out of the way.
Right. And we really appreciate it, Gerry. I mean, part of it is this COVID transcends sport right now. I mean, it's obviously it's a big impact on finances, on the way we act, on socioeconomic type issues. And it's impacting organizations from every organization, every sport organization, youth or not. So again, appreciate you being on here and sharing some insight with us. We've got I know some of these names that attendees that are on there, so we've got a wide variety, a couple overseas as well. But again, to everybody that's in the attendee box, you can use the Q&A and ask Gerry any questions, and we'll make sure we get to them. And again, appreciate your time. I know you're busy, so I'll let you get to it.
Okay, so when we talked about doing this, I was thinking, you know, we're talking about, you know, it says budgeting and administration.
Yeah.
This is not going to be an accounting lesson because I'm not very good at that. I leave that up to the experts. So you're not going to see a whole bunch of spreadsheets with that type of thing. But what I'm going to say is what I think some of the things that you need structurally and administratively to build and to this storm is going to be a test of how our organizations are going to be able to withstand some things. Some organizations require a lot more help than others. So one of the most important things, and I know with you know, BC Lacrosse, like a lot of organizations, a lot of it is volunteer based. There's different people involved with lacrosse, but the structures are such that if it wasn't for the volunteers, lacrosse in Canada just wouldn't be running to the extent that it is. There's so many hours that people put in, you know, so many dedicated people. But what happens sometimes with volunteers is, and COVID showed this, is there was half the world was doing nothing and just wanted to know what was going on. The other half of the world was working at their jobs or working at things and trying to juggle and balance things. So it is hugely important to make sure that you have a solid communication plan. And I'll go back to that later, is to know where the hierarchy is. It's nice to say that the CEO or whoever is considered the top of the organization is available any or all time. But a lot of the organizations, that is a volunteer who may or may not be able to answer things in the best way. In our sport, pretty much we have executive directors throughout the different member associations of the Canadian Lacrosse Association. Those executive directors, most are fairly consistent. There's not a lot of turnover with that. But I've been the president for now 18 months, and there's only 3 presidents that have been there longer than me now. There always is a fair amount of changeover, and it tends to be a little bit political sometimes. And so the executive directors are where a lot of the stability is. And that would be similar to a president of a lacrosse club or a general manager or VP of lacrosse operations, whatever the title would be of a lacrosse group. So what you have to figure out with your communication plan is who's going to be the spokesperson, who's going to be the person that talks to who, and who has what authorities. I'm just going to share a slide here just to show there is, this is an example of a flow of a communication of how, not saying that this is the absolute best flow, but this is the example of an organization of where, and part of this is dated as far as the amounts, but all the different connections of how people can connect through the different structures. And a lot of times it's because these groups here, it's whether you have a working board or if you have a board that is on policy. So for example, the BCLA, this board is basically to do with policy. All the real work is done by these groups here. All the real event is the volunteers, the athletes. Those are the worker bees. These are the people that are managing things. The board of directors, as it's called now, is basically responsible for the policy. So the communications, sometimes people just assume anything above their communication group is automatically, they'll call it the BCLA or the CLA as some group in the crowd where it needs to be communicated of what their policies are and how they're laid out directly. So you really need to know and make sure that your members try and communicate to them. This is the proper way to communicate. And if you're anywhere in the chain, is to be open to have the communication going up and down. Very often, it's been said with a lot of these minor or these type of organizations, the real power in the organization is the person writing the minutes, because they might add their slants as to what was said and how was said. And some people are expecting minutes to be similar to what you're going to get from a board of directors meeting or a shareholders meeting.
Right.
The other,
Like that, are they?
it's where the real power is. You want to be the one writing the minutes. The other is where there tends to be, sometimes there tends to be a little bit of distrust within a group, and quite often that is in around money. When people are concerned about money, is within your organization, you want to be transparent, but really when you're dealing with people's employment, or you're dealing with some things that, without being demeaning, some people just don't understand what some of the costs are from doing things one way or doing things another. And it's not always about cheapest. Remember, we're using volunteers, and there is so much in kind offered in our sport that we need to make sure that we're working collectively. So you want to be transparent with any of the financial transactions. If you're looking in a nonprofit society, the more information probably the better. If you're looking at an individual team, it would be okay to keep it with a smaller group. And it depends on who's paying the bills, because in some organizations, the bills, to run a senior team is now you're starting talking about real money to run a minor bantam team, or 14U as it's now called, or U15 field lacrosse team. The costs of running that team, and how a manager, which is probably a volunteer parent within the group, that person needs to be transparent and needs to make things available, because the people are putting up their money and putting it in trust. Is without that trust, you're gonna get yourself into a lot of issues. And every year, and there's a minor association somewhere in British Columbia, and I'm sure it's in other jurisdictions, where we get a call that something's not right. And
it's not adding up.
Pardon?
Something's not adding up.
Right. And sometimes there's antennas up, but a lot of people, they look at these reports and they don't know. So transparency, it allows for trust, but you have to be cognizant to make sure things are done well.
Yeah. Gerry, a question that came in actually pertaining to the slide. Would it help to give parents more information about the volunteers? Because they saw the number of volunteers, but would the hours of time volunteered actually help? I don't even know if that slide is a public facing.
I can, but here, I'll pull it back up. I closed it. I'll grab it.
So, I mean, I think it's a valid question in terms of, we do put a lot of emphasis on volunteers and the amount of volunteers, but I guess from the outside looking in, nobody really knows how many hours, people put into running these organizations.
Well, depending on it, you'll fill your day with whatever you're going to do. So with this here, in this volunteer group, and I think to answer the question, from a communication point of view, this is meant to just show the size of the people. Basically, you're looking at, for 18 or 16,000 athletes in this case, and this is dated, there were 7,000 volunteers, and that volunteers included coaches, included anybody who was registered as a volunteer, a coach, a manager, athletic therapist, anything along those lines. Right. Officials were actually clumped in with athletes in this particular one. They're not really volunteers, although different levels are doing different things. The number of hours, I would say that the person that is doing the 50-50 at the game, that's not a registered volunteer, and that's probably not somebody that was included in that number. Is the person who may be doing the team laundry, or in the olden days, the team phoning, or social convening for a club, that wouldn't be included. This here, what was included, it wasn't, the ones that are here are the ones that are putting in a lot of time that are officially registered. Do you think that answers that a little bit?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, this is a communications chart too. This isn't, the more I'm looking at it, the more I'm realizing this is probably not a document I can just go on the BC Lacrosse website and find with ease.
It's in the communication plan. However, the plan that we have right now,
Yeah.
and it's being updated. Okay, so I'm jumping ahead to the strategic plan. Is our communication plan was last updated in 2012, but that's not the one that's posted. The one that's posted is 2008. So it's out of date, and it's something that should go through a regular cycle. We have a series of we have an ongoing strategic plan. We're finishing the end of a 4-year plan right now in 2020.
Yep.
Our 2021 to 2024 plan was put together last year, presented to our members, and it's what drives our organization. So that's was actually the next point. Is the strategic plan for your organization is critical in deciding what you're going to be doing over the next while. And I break it down to when I've run teams for more than when you run a team, is yes, you want to have success. Well, how do you measure that success? And you have to map out what it is that you're trying to do, because some things are just beyond your control. So our strategic plan would include number of participants, level of excellence, and how we're going to achieve those. It would include official training, official excellence, and what's very important to that is to have KPIs, key performance indicators. Yep. is set them. Now, our first set of strategic plans that I was involved with, and that would have been 2000 to 2004, we put in numbers, and honestly, a lot of those were unrealistic. We learned what could be, and then also things come up that we allocated resources in a different way. In the early 2000s, the BCLA put a lot of effort and a lot of resources into coach development and coach development resources. A lot of those resources are still available. The basics of what is used for the coaching manuals on courses for level, comp intro, comp dev, and all the CLA manuals that have been used to date were actually initially published by that group. That was what they felt was important to, if we have good coaches, we can build good athletes and we can move things forward. So your strategic plan can be a formal thing. I mean, it involved 30-something people with a facilitator, and hundreds and hundreds of pages of documents and back and forth. Now it's a little bit more streamlined. We look at the old strategic plan, which things we're continuing, which things we're going to change, and what our focuses are going to be for the next 4 years. Now, your strategic plan might be a 2-year strategic plan, a 5-year strategic plan, but I believe that it's critical to any organization's health is to come up with a strategic plan. And in there, you're going to include what your revenues are going to be or projected to be, and what the sources of those revenues are. Typically an organization is going to be looking at sponsors, is going to be looking at registration fees, and it will be looking at government programs of some kind.
Right.
I'll use as an example, in the BCLA, is part of our reach out to the community. We partner with a group called iSpark, Indigenous Sports Participation and Action something Council. I'm not sure the exact acronyms top of my head. And that group is responsible for Indigenous athletes to be more active. So in effect, they've contracted the BCLA to have a person work with the groups in the schools and in their communities to help teach or help bring lacrosse to those communities and to help strengthen it. Now, that's co-funded, so it's something that, you know, part of it, I believe it does filter through from a government pot at some point, but that fulfills part of our strategic plan in the part of, okay, we need outreach and we need to engage our Indigenous athletes in our sport. British Columbia is different than it is in Ontario or in, you know, the First Nations Lacrosse Association is a separate member of the Canadian Lacrosse Association, and, you know, they have very strong parts. But the further we are away from that core, is the less attached they are to the sport that they're very tied to. So we try and help them with bridging that gap. That is part of something that not only we view as being the right thing to do, it's to our mutual benefits. So those type of programs, our wheelchair lacrosse program was heavily subsidized. It is part of our strategic plan to bring the sport of lacrosse to all people that can play it. Our organization, together with the Canucks Autism Network, is another. It's not to teach them box lacrosse or field lacrosse. It's the participation and to outreach the sport to the masses, and that is a big part of our strategic plan and what it is we do. But we're a fairly mature organization. A less mature organization is probably going to be more focused on what's working for my members, and what's going to work. So one of the key things in the strategic plan is to look at what your purpose is. And I'm going to share, again, I'll use the BC, I'm not calling it a mission statement, it's the purpose. It's the purpose that's in their constitution. Now, part of this is for legal requirements, but it's what we are. We're here to foster the game of lacrosse. And you can see with the different points there is, it's not just to run the leagues. It's not just to allow our registered athletes to play in an organized fashion. That is one of the things we do, but we believe that is the cornerstone to keep our lacrosse program going. So the biggest thing is to know what your purpose is of whatever your organization, and to make sure BC Lacrosse has a spirit model, which explains more or less the culture of lacrosse, which includes spirit, respect. I don't have that with me, sorry.
Okay.
But it shows the different the different cornerstones that shows up in a single infographic. One of the other strengths of lacrosse, really, and it was touched on earlier, is the volunteers. We do have significant, and it's more and more, and for lacrosse to have great success, it's going to need more paid. There needs to be more money in the sport so we can pay people. When people can make their living at the sport, it is very far between the athletes that are making a living. It is coming and it's getting better, but you know, the strict lacrosse only athlete is a rarity, and you know, but throughout the different organizations, if somebody wants to make a living at lacrosse, it's generally in the supply side, or they're kind of subsidizing their lacrosse love by doing some of the other things. So, but you have to be cognizant in your organizations of who is being paid and who is a volunteer. You do have to understand that there is some differences. And I'm, the officials, they're paid, and it's a different thing. A lot of times people will pay for, people doing shot clocks and game activities, where generally the athletes and most often the coaching staffs, except at the very elite levels, they're doing it for the love of the game. And a typical coach in junior, whether it's junior A, B, or C, is probably spending during the season somewhere between 30 and 60 hours a week at lacrosse. It is, and to find those individuals, that's what you have to find for a successful program.
Yeah.
And more often than not, if they are being paid, it is not enough to. It works out to being somewhere in the neighborhood of $3 an hour. They become the same as child labor. With your different groups, and getting to the more to the money side here now, is when you're working out your budgets, it is terrible, especially with mainly volunteer organization, is to have to come to everybody at the end of the year and say, you know what, we need another $50 a player, we need another. Budgeting is hugely important. You don't want to be running out of money. If you have the ability, and this is what happens with a lot of the senior teams in Canada, whether it's senior A or B, is they have somebody who can afford a cash call to carry them over the hump. Things are getting better. But you do need to be financially prudent with your budgeting to make sure that things are working. Now, right now, this year, a lot of people have paid their fees. So a typical association, I'll say somebody in Red Deer, Alberta. So the kids have registered in December. They have 500 players registered. They've collected somewhere between $200 and $400 a player. They have somewhere between $50,000 to $100,000 worth of registration fees. So they've gone out and bought shorts and balls and everything else. Now there's no season. That money's gone. It's spent. It's still going to be used. And now they have the players and their parents coming back to them and say, hey, there's no lacrosse. I want my money back. Well, we spent $15,000 on uniforms and $3,000 on balls, and now we're in a problem. I can give you credit towards next year. These are the kind of things that goes to the communications that you're going to run into. Every area is a little bit different. If you have the ability to carry some over from year to year, you're a nonprofit organization. It's not fair to this group to fund groups down the road. You have to find the right water with that, and that's what a lot of people are struggling with right now, is finding the water of what is fair and what is financially prudent for the organization.
Finding the right mix and understanding what it is from year to year is it's a tough battle sometimes, and you've got so many factors that need to weigh in and weigh out, and the differences between a minor organization like you had alluded to versus maybe a junior organization that doesn't have that responsibility to get down to zero as a nonprofit with their athletes.
So a typical, I'll use a junior organization. They've done their due diligence throughout the off season, and they've lined up sponsors, where they might have people on 2 or 3 year contract. Say Joe's Plumbing is, he's giving $1,000, and it means that he has a name in the program. He might have a jersey bar, something along those lines over the 3 years. So the group running the junior team says, hey, there's not going to be any lacrosse this year. So I'm Joe's Plumbing. Okay, that's fine. I'll just assume that my 3 year contract will just extend another. So he's already paid that. The club isn't gaining any revenue they're just stretching the same amount of revenue over more time because they've already spent some. So all those things together, 50/50s and donations all help. But you have to be aggressive and try and get as much as you can, as much bang for your buck, and be fair to your sponsors. Or you're not going to be able to field a team. You won't be able to go back.
Yeah.
I didn't have a lot of other items on the list as far as what I would consider the practices that are required. I'm happy to give examples of what's happening with some of the groups. If there is any questions, or Brad, you can think of something else you think the group might want to hear about.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, to anybody that's watching, you can put any questions or comments in the Q&A box, and we'll certainly get to them. It's been a tough go with organizations north, south of the border, and across the pond. I mean, I know that we, for Israel Lacrosse, have had constant calls. We were shut down, and then we were slowly let back into our national team training facility. Whereas, I'm getting those same calls here in Ontario about our facilities for major series lacrosse, which we share with youth lacrosse. So so the question that popped in is exactly what I was just going to get to is, how are you guys handling a little bit more with COVID related issues? Is there a return of play protocol being discussed in BC?
Okay, I can. I see Christopher has two things in the chat, and
Yep.
I'll cover that one first. I do have some growing the game. I'll give some suggestions of some things those are the two biggest topics. I give credo to the box sector chair, Ron McCory, yesterday in the box sector meetings. We've been in Canadian Lacrosse Association meetings for the last 8 days. He took an entire afternoon's worth of meetings and said, we're not playing, very little. It was a conversation about what we're doing to get back to play, where we're at, and what the ideas are. So across the country and all the jurisdictions are different. Part of this is my opinion. This is what I know, and this is what my opinions are. This is what I know. In most areas of the country, the sporting bodies from the government have said, come up with your plan, follow our health guidelines, and we want to approve it before you march forward.
Okay.
Because of liabilities and different other things, they have now said, you know what, you follow the guidelines, go on your own way, have your board of directors approve it, and hopefully they don't get sued. That was basically, you're on your own, but follow the guidelines. And then they're offering a little bit more help. Some areas of the country are a lot harder hit and working. So here in British Columbia, we've submitted a return to play. We've been told that 2 players competing for a loose ball is not going to be part of activity through the balance of this year. Don't even plan on it. Our activity it doesn't need to be inside based or outside based, as long as, and so using, if you're in an arena, using a quadrant based system of number of athletes so they can physically distance, and with cleaning and disinfecting things. What lacrosse has going for it is not like basketball, is we're not sharing the scoring object with our hands. Hands to face is a big issue.
Right.
Whether the players need to wear masks, I don't know that the science is telling us that yet. That seems like it would be an uncomfortable but a reasonably simple fix. Whether they need to wear shields, like a welding type shield with their mask, and I know Bauer was working on a new helmet or mask design. Now whether that's coming to play, I don't know about. But whether you're inside or outside, the type of activities you're going to be able to do is you're going to be able to compete, but not competing for a loose ball with another player. It's going to be against the clock. It's going to be against time. So you can continue doing things like learning mental prep, other trainings, but the actual gameplay
Yeah.
is not going to happen in minor sports. Something like the NHL getting together, that is a completely different story. We do not have the kind of scale that they have that can happen. But the other part of the COVID question is really, it's revolved around money. There's going to be some announcements coming out from the Canadian Lacrosse Association. Most leagues have made announcements of one form or another. Here in British Columbia, we've canceled our lacrosse provincials. We are hoping to put together some kind of competition-based activity where, not relay races, but we're hoping to do it through social media, where a group of athletes are going to compete a task, more like an obstacle race or something, in different areas. And the other thing you're not going to be able to do is travel. You're going to need to stay in your own, close to your own jurisdiction. So that's kind of the plan. The Canadian Lacrosse Association is, they're stuck. Where all the coaching and the officials are trying to do some training in that, but basically it's going to be in the format of online classrooms of some form or another.
Right.
And moving our models to that in the long run might be saving us money, and we can focus more on the sport of lacrosse. It might make our game knowledge or our intellect of the game.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people that are very good at video editing. And I mean, I've had conversations with Brad. It's something that as a coach, I like to improve my skills with it. We were looking at a program for all of our Team BC coaches to have a program to help them dissect and teach the players the mental part of the game in a greater form. So as far as recruitment, so there's a couple of initiatives that have proven to be very good. Lacrosse is, outside of female involvement in lacrosse involvement in Canada has not grown much when it's come to boys. In the female sectors, in both women's field and female box, it has grown more than the boys side, with the exception of some pockets. And those are the pockets that have done well. It has been connect with the community, and having the maven athletes in the area, driving it, and that attracts other athletes. Things that an organization can do. The most inventive thing that I've seen over the last 10 years to drive has been the lawn sign program from Ontario. It has been proven very successful. They started it with 8 associations. Every one of those associations had registration increases. They've now expanded it to subsidizing it across. I believe they had 20-something minor associations sign on to it. All of those associations' registrations were initially up before COVID hit. It was a very similar to a political sign. I know it's something that is going to be employed in my jurisdiction next year.
I got a picture of one. I can actually share that right now if people want to see it.
Okay.
You see that? Gerry, can you see that?
I can see it. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, that's what Gerry was essentially talking about. Was it's just a, like you said, political size type sign, lawn sign.
So with to grow it, it's getting it to the masses through the schools. Has always proven to be a very successful tool. What lacrosse has done a reasonable job of is taking care of our elite players, and we're doing a better job of taking care of our recreational players, but mainly the older recreational players. And I'm talking our things like our junior masters leagues, our senior C leagues, people that aren't interested in a lot of practicing, just want to get out and play. if we can keep a player till he's 21 years old, our chances of still having him at 28 are a lot better than they were 10 years ago. Where we're losing a lot of athletes is right in those high school areas.
Yeah.
And the other thing that we need to do is perhaps with this COVID, we can use this as an opportunity, is having backyard lacrosse. Is, same as a basketball hoop in every driveway, or, in Canada, a lot of hockey nets and lacrosse nets in the driveway, and have it as a backyard sport is something that can encourage. Having cheap, crappy little sticks at Canadian Tire is not a bad thing. It gets people to play it and try it, and it's okay to not play it at the highest possible levels.
Well, and one of the things that makes our sport unique, we have a whole bunch of different disciplines. We've got backyard lacrosse, we've got field lacrosse, we've got box lacrosse, we've got women's, we've got men. Like I kind of like the uniqueness of it. I'm a proponent of some rule changes that make things a little bit more uniform, but it's nice to see different disciplines out there. And you'd mentioned backyard lacrosse. So to Christopher's point, tomorrow, I believe Ron McSpadgen's doing, I think it's tomorrow, he's doing a session on his
3-on-3,
which has been pretty, like we have it in our rink. And, we've had intermission games where we've had little fellas coming out on the floor, but I've seen the 3-on-3 setup also used in backyard type scenarios. So it's not too often. I mean, when we played backyard, it's literally put a net in the backyard and have some fun with it. But these kids actually have a little crease, which is kind of cool too. So, but that's tomorrow. I forget what time he comes on, but that's his part of it. And I think those type of scenarios are, like, for a youth point of view, growing it, I really enjoy that because it doesn't take a lot of money for it.
So what I'm really pleased of, and when I was running, there was a couple of individuals, and we had some great volunteers. When I was with Poco Minor Lacrosse, we were the second largest association in the province 3 years in a row out of the 5 years I was there. But what warmed my heart is every time you saw kids walking down the street, they had a lacrosse stick in their hand. It was a smallish community of about 35-ish thousand people, a railroad style lunch bucket community, but everybody played lacrosse. And it was through a lot of recruiting but they were all playing it, and then the clubs were having success, and a lot of those players, even the ones that weren't elite players, now have continued on as volunteers within so many of the different associations within the area. So the legacy of those type of things, because they all played it, was significant. You were talking about competition, and I believe you're talking about competition of other programs. Sometimes we can do a little guerrilla marketing when it comes to lacrosse. I know a couple of us did some promotion work with Darren Fridge, and I went down to Washington State high school groups and to help them with their high school field lacrosse. And what our tactic was along the lines of telling the football coaches, rather than your guy playing track, don't you want him to play this game and in your off season? So we really worked on the support of the football coaches, partly at the expense of the track coaches. The level of success of that, I don't know. Whether you have having kids playing outside and other people seeing it is something that, hey, how's that played? Oh, that looks like fun. I want to try it. Those are the kind of things that when it grows organically, but you got to get to a critical mass, and that is so hard when you just have a small group of dedicated volunteers, and
right.
Other people look at you like you're crazy. I mean, in the Vancouver area, we have a significant South Asian population. Their growth in cricket is next to nothing because they keep it within their own group.
Right.
They're not growing it outside the group. They view it as their game. where it's huge in some parts of the world. And lacrosse, we can't view it as our game, and we're the only keepers of it. You mentioned something about the rules. There's been a lot of talk about homogenizing the rules amongst, and during the meetings, there was a lot of talk. CLA box rules are different than World Lacrosse rules, which are different than NLL rules, that are different than field lacrosse rules. And, there's so many different sets of rules out there. And women's field lacrosse is a different sport. It's not the same sport as field lacrosse. It's not meant to be. And there is something to be said of having some unification. And I think the last World Championships showed a lot of people in Canada that there is a lot of parts of the World Lacrosse rules that make a lot of sense, that aren't that much different than the Canadian lacrosse rules. And the US box lacrosse rules are very similar to the Canadian box lacrosse rules, which are both different than the NLL. The NLL is going to do what the NLL is going to do, and I don't think we need to play catch up with them. They run a hybrid game of field lacrosse and box lacrosse inside. So it's similar, but the unification of the different other forms of lacrosse is something that I think you're going to see. There's a willingness amongst the groups to push it forward, and that's primarily driven by US box. That there is more box lacrosse players in the United States than there is in Canada now. It is, and it's growing.
Yep.
And it's a good thing. And I'm a firm believer of that. And I see their youth playing Canadian youth in box lacrosse and being more and more competitive all the time. And I'm not going to be surprised as they force Canadian box lacrosse to no different than what the Europeans and the Americans and the Russians had done to Canadians who thought hockey was our world and nothing was ever going to touch us. We had to learn a lot from that and not be so stuck in our ways, and do what's best for the game instead of what's best for our little fiefdom.
Yeah. Well, we're almost approaching that hour. If we've got any questions or comments, I would suggest to put them in there, because I believe you got another call coming up shortly. So I don't want to keep you too long. I appreciate your time on here. I know it wasn't the sexiest subject in the world, but I really couldn't think of anybody better.
By the way, thanks for giving that one to me.
Well, you know what? I wanted someone, you have an appreciation for this kind of stuff. And you also have an energy about it where it's not just budgeting and administration. I mean, that's probably a poor title, but there's so much that goes into these organizations on a provincial level, on a regional level, on a federal level. And you kind of have your hands all in these. So it made a lot of sense. And also I wanted participation from British Columbia and our Western counterparts. It's important to me as someone who grows up in Canada to have that. And we had a great time this summer. We were able to reconnect again at the coaching clinic in Toronto. So you're in my neck of the woods, and mutual friends. So to me, it's all about respect. And I appreciate your time. Like I said, I know you've had a busy week. I'd like to let you put any closing remarks on it before I end the meeting, but I want to thank everybody who came in here today, especially the attendees. So Gerry, I'll let you end it, and then we will prepare for our 6 o'clock face-off session.
Okay. Hey, Brad, I love the idea of this project. When you told me about it, I'm a full supporter of it. I think it's fantastic. Knowledge is a great thing. Communication. I appreciate the comments, and I think these type of things where we can do a better and better job of it, and these type of learns are going to be part of our new reality. And I can't wait. I took a look at my schedule here a couple of weeks ago. There has not been 2 weeks over the last 20 years where I have not played lacrosse at least one day for 2 weeks in a row. And
Yeah.
this has been a long time, and I can't wait for it to come back. So thanks again, Brad. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Everybody have a great night. Talk soon.
Okay, bye now.